Well, after an introduction like that, I am tempted to say thanks for coming and see you tomorrow night. I mean, I don't know how to live up to Jim's gracious words, but I am thrilled to be here tonight and to be part of your Lenten journey and to be blessed by simply being with you. So thank you for your prayers and your gracious hospitality. I was talking to Jim. Another priest that we both mutually admire is Monsignor Michael McCarran, who played a role in our formation, who I also think is one of the finest preachers of the diocese. And somebody once asked me, who do you think are the finest preachers of the diocese? This was several years ago. Bishop Sullivan was still alive, so you always say the bishop's name first, right? Some of you remember Bishop Sullivan? Remember, oh, wonderful, good to see you. But I said the two priests in the diocese whose preaching touches my heart and mind at the same time are Mike McCarran and your pastor, Jim Curran. So yes. So I'm not intimidated being here because I believe the Lord has brought us here together. But I know that Jim has set a high standard in terms of preaching and teaching here. So what a thrill to be with you. So we called her the Queen of Bingo. Does bingo happen in Norfolk anywhere? Bingo? A little bit. My grandmother, Marie Woods, we called her the Queen of Bingo because she didn't just play bingo. She lived bingo. On Monday nights, she was at my parish in Pennsylvania, St. Aloysius Parish in Pottstown, Pennsylvania. Bingo started at 7 o'clock on Monday nights. I think, oh, that would be tonight, right? 7 o'clock. My grandmother arrived at the church hall at 4:30 because she wanted to get her lucky seat. Oh, you know. And she wanted to set up her good luck charms, and she then would go back to the church kitchen where the Slovak ladies were making pierogies and halupkis and drinking Schmidt's beer. 4:30. Bingo at 7. Now, Tuesday nights, she was at her home parish, St. Joseph's, down in Spring City. Wednesday, she was at the Methodist Church. Thursday, she did interfaith outreach by playing bingo at the local synagogue. Friday night, she took off. And then when she was out doing bingo, my grandfather was home in his chair. It was his chair, set right in front of the big old Zenith television. Do you remember those things? They had the wooden frames, and you could put all your tchotchkes on top of them that collected dust. My grandfather would watch the Philadelphia Phillies lose consistently, and he, being an Irish American, would swear at the television like a sailor, even with the grandchildren present. And my grandmother was not happy. Now, my grandmother didn't always play bingo. She didn't have time because when they married, she was 19, he was 20 when they got married. They had no money. He was a machinist for the Westinghouse Corporation down in Valley Forge, and she was raising eventually 6 children. So they lived in a row home in a little town called Spring City. And so they had 6 kids, two of them, her parents, plus an aunt with dementia. That's 11 people in the row house. And here's the miracle: 1 bathroom. It can be done. It can be done. 1 bathroom. So she was busy raising this family, running this household, and then she would work 30 hours a week in the laundry of a local state hospital for those with mental disabilities, a residential hospital. And her hands, she would come home from work, her hands were chapped because of the bleach and the hot water, and she'd get right back to work doing her own family's laundry. And that's how they lived their life. Now, once all the children were off on their own and her parents had passed away and it was just the 2 of them, they settled into that nice flow with Grandpop watching the Phillies lose and my grandmother out playing bingo almost 4 or 5 nights a week. And that's how it was. And she was very happy, and he was very happy, and we were happy that they were happy. Until 1982, when my grandfather had a series of strokes that left him paralyzed on the right side of his body. And he could no longer speak, which for an Irish fella is pretty hard. Not being able to say a word, not being able to swear at the television. His face would turn red, but he could not get the words out. And he couldn't move, so he was no longer going to walk. And he couldn't swallow. The muscles had been affected in his throat, so they put a feeding tube in. And he was in the hospital, then he was at a rehab center, and everybody was saying to my grandmother, you need to put him in a nursing home. You can't take care of him at home. Well, you didn't tell my grandmother, you can't. That was the wrong way to start a sentence. And so she said, nope, I'm taking him home because that's what you do. So they took out his chair and they put in one of those hospital beds, and she learned new skills. How do you change a bed while the person is still in it, and how to change an adult diaper, and maybe hardest of all, how do you feed your husband through a feeding tube? The grandkids, I was the oldest of 16 grandchildren, and still am. I am the oldest of 16 grandchildren. I'm getting older, she learned. We were much younger then, and we called it the green goop. The stuff that they got special from the pharmacy. It was the liquid food that was going to go in, and she had to learn how to put it in a syringe and do that, and all those things that you do when you become a caregiver like that. And they settled into the new normal. Now, I was in college at the time, because as Father Jim has pointed out, I am much, much older than he. And I was in college at the time, and I commuted to save money, so I drove back and forth. And their little town was sort of along the way. So I could stop in if I knew there was a Phillies game on. I could watch it with my grandfather, and I would swear for him, or I'd just sit with my grandmother and watch what she called her stories. The Guiding Light, General Hospital, as sands through the hourglass, so are the days of our lives. Oh, some of you sinners have watched those same programs. Choir, anybody? Choir? Oh, good. Confession is good. So we'd watch them and all these things. And I remember one day, it was a springtime day, I remember, because there was pollen on my car. And I was driving home, and I thought I should stop in and see them. So I parked. They kind of lived on a street that was a hill, and I parked my car, and you'd walk across sort of this old front porch with old wicker furniture that General Eisenhower must have put there. It was that old, and I pulled the old squeaky screen door. They had a screen door and then a wooden door, and the wooden door was open, so it was just the screen door because it was nice enough, and the door squeaked open. And have you ever walked into a room, and as soon as you walk in, you know something's wrong, but you don't know what's wrong? You know what I mean? You just know something's not right. And I walked in from the bright outside into the darkened inside, and it took a minute for my eyes to adjust, and I finally could see what was going on in the room. And what was going on in the room was that the green goop was everywhere. My grandmother had tried to feed my grandfather, and something had gone wrong. And it was all over the sheets. It was all over him. His face was bright red. I thought, oh, if he could talk, what words would be coming out of his mouth right now? He was upset and angry. People who have had strokes, I'm not an expert in this, but I know sometimes when you've had a stroke, you cry more often than you might have otherwise. So he was red in the face and tears. My grandmother was in tears because of just this mess that had been made. And I'm, whatever I was, 20 years old, male. My first instinct is, get out of this room, right? Back up onto the porch and let them take care of it and then go back in when everything is settled. That was my instinct. So I put my hand back on the screen door, and it squeaked. And my grandmother turned to me. Now, just another fact you need to know. Remember, I'm the oldest grandchild of 16, right? And already in college, I was saying to my Irish grandmother, I may be a priest, which means I was her favorite. Got it? And she told everybody else, Michael is my favorite, which they still remind me of that years later. We've done family therapy. It's fine, So she had never raised her voice to me. That was my parents' job. She was spoiling me. And so there I am, squeaky screen door. My grandmother, who never raised her voice to me, she turned, and I don't know that she even had been aware that I was in the room up until that point. And she looked at me and she said in a loud voice, "Don't you dare." And I just froze. Hand on the screen door halfway open. I froze. She said, "Don't you dare leave." And then she said, "Don't you leave, because sometimes love looks like this." Sometimes love looks like this. And she was right, wasn't she? I've been a priest 25 years now, and I know what you're thinking. Father Mike, you look far too young to be that old, right? No, that's not what you're thinking. So I've ordained 25 years this year, and I have preached like Father Jim. I preach about love all the time. And I love love. And I love it when love looks lovely. I love it when love looks like the bride and the groom. The bride has just appeared at the door, and the groom who went to VMI has become this puddling pool of tears to my left as he watches her come down the aisle. I love it when love looks like a bride and a groom on a wedding day. I love it when love looks like the mother holding her child for the first time at the hospital. I love it when love looks like Mr. and Mrs. Shia at my parish. This summer, they will celebrate their 70th wedding anniversary. One of them is a saint, at least, right? Maybe both. And Mr. and Mrs. Shia, when they walk into church on Saturday evening for the 5:30 Mass, they are always holding hands. 69 and a half years into marriage, they're still holding hands. Now, first of all, I think it's because they love each other, and secondly, because that way they don't fall down as they're walking in, right? I love it when love looks like Mother Teresa caressing the brow of someone dying, showing tenderness in a moment like that. I love it when love looks like Father Jim baptizing somebody. You know, I love it when love looks like Pope Francis hugging somebody who's run up to him at an event. I love it when love looks lovely. But anybody here who's ever been married, or anybody here who's ever been a parent, or if you've ever tried to be a faithful friend or a faithful Christian, you know that love isn't always lovely, right? Sometimes love looks, remember that mother holding the child for the first time? That's beautiful. And then that child becomes a teenager. Oh, you know what I'm talking about, right? And you told her she could go out with the group, but she had to be back by 9:30, and now it's 11:45. And you're sitting on the couch, and you don't know where she is, back in the days before cell phones. And when she comes home, you're going to do two things. Ground her for the rest of her life, and then hug her because you're thrilled that she's home. Or maybe even before she turned into a teenager, maybe when she was 4 years old and had one of those terrible coughs and colds, and she just couldn't get to sleep, and you are exhausted, and you sit there rubbing her back at 2 a.m, because that's the only thing you can do to bring her comfort. Sometimes love looks like forgiveness. Sometimes love looks like just getting through the day. Sometimes love looks like starting over. And sometimes love looks like a 70-year-old woman cleaning up the green goop that's all over her husband. Don't you dare leave. Sometimes love looks like this. Who taught you what love really looks like? That is not a rhetorical question. Who taught you what love really looks like? Has anyone taught anyone in this room what love looks like? Has anyone seen love in this room? Come on, choir, you like to sing. Your mother, thank you. Your mother, thank you. Your father, excellent. Section 1. Your mother, the person sitting next to you right now, beautiful. Your grandmother, Section 3. Your mother, grandmother, your brother, your parents, excellent. Maybe tonight, as part of your prayer when you get home, is maybe just to sit with the Lord and say thank you for those kind of people. who show us what love really looks like. Of course, as Christians, we believe the one who shows us perfectly what love looks like is Jesus. Right? And one of the ways that I understand Holy Week, one of the ways that I understand Easter, all the celebrations that we will do from Palm Sunday right through Easter Sunday, one of the ways that I understand all of that is that what we're doing, one of the things we're doing in all those celebrations is we are celebrating the fact that in Jesus, God is showing us what perfect love looks like. And it's kind of like, the love of God is like the most precious gem ever. And what you do with the gem is you look at it and the light's shining on it and you see its beauty. But if you turn it just a little bit, it shines in a different way, right? I don't own diamonds, but I've heard this is true. Anybody? Right? That if you take it, then turn it again, and the light hits it slightly different, new colors come out, a new vibrancy, right? If you take it and look at, or whatever it is, a piece of art, you look at it from this angle, you look at it from that angle. Well, what Holy Week does is takes the love of God and lets us look at it from lots of different wonderful angles. But all the time, at least that's one of the ways I pray my way through Holy Week, is I keep remembering God is saying to me, this is what love looks like. So on Palm Sunday, what does love look like? Looks like Jesus, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, riding triumphantly into Jerusalem with people shouting, Hosanna to the King of David, and he's riding on a donkey. Not a white horse. He's not being carried in on the shoulders of some guys who have one of those chairs, that are carried by servants. He's not on some kind of chariot pulled by Charlton Heston's horses from Ben-Hur. Anybody remember the movie Ben-Hur, right? No, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords is riding into Jerusalem on a beast of burden, the same kind of beast of burden maybe that his mother rode as they fled into Egypt after his birth. What does love look like on Palm Sunday? Humility, right? But it also looks like this. You've been to the Holy Land, right? So if anybody here ever had a chance to go to the Holy Land, one of the things you learn is that seeing it, being there, opens it up in a new way. At least that's been my experience, and I praise God for it. As Jesus comes down the road on the Mount of Olives, and you can still walk that road. It's the same road from the time of Jesus. It's been paved a little bit, but it's the same route. And as you come down the Mount of Olives, you come this way, there's a little valley, and then the hill goes up, and Jerusalem is built on this side. Okay? So Jesus is coming down on that road, on the hill, and he's on that donkey, and people are shouting his praises. And if he picks his head up and looks across the valley to the hill of Jerusalem, what does he see on the other side? You can still see it today. Well, over there on the left is Caiaphas' house. Caiaphas, the high priest, where he's going to be just a couple of nights later under arrest before the Sanhedrin and then thrown into a pit in the ground to be kept for Pilate the next day. That's to his left, and he can see it from his place on the donkey. And to the right is the place where Pilate stayed when he came to visit Jerusalem. He didn't live there all the time. The Jewish people were too much trouble. And when he came, that is, politically, there was too much tension and trouble going on. To the right is where Jesus could look and say, that's where I'm going to be on Friday morning when Pilate puts me on trial. And then he could see the hill going up behind from Pilate's place to the place called the Skull, Golgotha, Calvary. In other words, even as people are acclaiming him as king, he can look up across the valley and see the key places that are going to lead to his death. Just think about that for a minute. He sees what's coming, and he could turn that donkey around, and in an hour he could be at Bethany. He could be in Bethlehem. In 2 hours, he could be out in the Judean desert. He could turn north and be up in Galilee, and they would never find him. He sees that faithfulness to the Father is going to lead him directly into suffering. What does love look like? Not taking the easy way, but going forward knowing this is going to cost me something. That's what love looks like. Don't we have those experiences in life where we see what's coming? And every fiber of our being says, is there an escape route? Is there an easier route? Is there another way? Do I really love this much to pay the price that's coming? What does love look like on Palm Sunday? Jesus moved forward. He moved forward. On Holy Thursday, what does love look like? Jesus sitting at the table with his disciples, the people whom he loved. One of them is going to betray him. Sitting at the table with somebody you know is going to let you down. Right? And in the midst of that meal, he takes bread and wine. And remember what the dynamic is. He knows he's got to leave. He knows he's going back to the Father. Yet he loves these people. Have you ever been in a situation where you want to stay, but you know you have to go? Every time I go on vacation, that's how I feel, I want to stay, but I know I have to go. Jesus wants to stay with the people that he loves, but he's got to return to the right hand of the Father, and because he's God, he finds a way to do both. He returns to the Father, and he stays with us. Take it. This is my body. Drink it. This is my blood. He stays with us because he knows we need to know where to find him. And in the Eucharist, he's there. What does love look like? Staying with us. It also looks like him getting up in the middle of the meal, wrapping himself with a towel, getting down onto the floor, and washing the filthy feet of those disciples. The creator of the universe, humbly washing what needs to be cleansed. Humble service. And the challenge, as I have done, you must do. That's what love looks like. What's it look like on Good Friday? It looks like standing silently before the false accusations of Pilate, even though he could have answered every question immediately. It looks like him taking the burden of the cross on his shoulder and then falling. What does love look like? It looks like Jesus saying, I'm going to get back up. And the weight of that cross didn't get any lighter when he stood up, but he got back up and he went forward, not once, not twice, but 3 times, falling and then finding the courage in his Father to keep going forward. That's what love looks like. It looks like him on the cross with his flesh being pierced by the Roman nails, and as his life is literally flowing out of him. What does love look like? It looks like him saying those unimaginable words, Father, forgive them. Forgive them. It looks like him in his suffering, looking down and seeing his mother and saying, behold your son, behold your mother. He's making sure that his mom will have somewhere to go. In the middle of the suffering, you don't have to be selfish. See what I mean? Jesus, if anybody had reason to focus on his own pain, it would have been Jesus in that moment. What's he doing? He's taking care of somebody else. Behold your mother. Behold your son. Taking care of people, even as he's suffering. It looks like the Son of God. Love looks like the Son of God going to the place that we think is the worst place of all, the tomb. And he goes there because he's going to teach us that the tomb never gets the last word in our story. That death thinks it wins and loses. That life wins and love wins and hope wins. That's what it looks like. And then on Holy Saturday and on Easter Sunday, what does love look like? Well, on Easter Sunday at my parish, what Easter Sunday looks like at my parish is a lot of people I haven't seen since Christmas. Does that happen here? Dressed in clothes they haven't worn for a while, and children who have had far too much chocolate. Are you with me? Right? Far too much sugar. But in the midst of all of that joyous, messy humanity of all these people gathered together, what does love look like? It looks like a tomb that's empty. Because death cannot hold him. Death has no more power over him. And because it doesn't have power over him, it doesn't have power over us. It looks like an empty tomb. That's the promise for our tombs, too. And what's it look like at the Easter Vigil? It looks like Jesus, who has changed everything by his resurrection, now changing people through baptism, confirmation, and the Eucharist. It looks like people, last year at the Easter Vigil, 2.5 hours into it, the last confirmation has happened. People are saying, can we have a break and a cocktail at this point? They're Catholics. And there they all stood, and I knew the journeys of some of these people, from drug addiction to faith, from adultery to forgiveness, from hopelessness to embracing the faith. And I looked at them in the radiance of their faces, and I just said at the end of all those sacraments, that's what God's love looks like. And everybody applauded, and then we took a break. During Holy Week, we're celebrating this immense mystery, the dying and the rising of Christ because God loves us so much. That's what his love looks like. And we celebrate it every year. And part of the genius of our Catholic tradition is this. If you're going to celebrate something wonderful, our tradition calls us to do 3 things. Number 1, get ready for it. Number 2, do it well. And then number 3, bask in its glory. Right? Get ready for it, enjoy it, and then sit and just chew on it some more. I was trying to think of an analogy. It's like what my mother did to us and for us on Thanksgiving when I was growing up. We always went to church in the morning. My mother said, we're going to church at 8 o'clock. We weren't in school. I wanted to watch the Macy's parade. She said, Thanksgiving is a day to thank God. We're going to church because the Eucharist means thank you. And that was it. My mother did not go to the school of parenting where you negotiate with your children, right? She announced what was happening and enforced it, right? And my father just said, yes, dear. So it was all good. It was all good. So we went to church, and then we went to high school football games on Thanksgiving. Up in Pennsylvania, they used to. They don't do it anymore. There was a football game. My mother gave us the same lecture every year. Do not eat at the football game. I don't want you to ruin your supper, right? What's her genius? If you're going to feast, save some room. What are we doing in Lent? If we're going to feast on the good news of resurrection, eat a little less during Lent. Spend a little less during Lent. And all that money you save on what you would have spent on yourself, spend it so somebody else can eat. Give it so somebody else can be blessed. And in all of that, pray a lot more, because we need some gospel honesty, right? Let the light of the gospel shine on you. Let it shine so you can see what has to be let go of, what needs to be cleansed, what part of you needs to be washed by the humble Jesus. Right? The closer we get to the light, the more we see some of the dust, but it's the only way to freedom. Right? And so this is what the church does on its 2 most important hinge beliefs. The Incarnation, which is that God became one of us. We celebrate that at Christmas. What do? We get ready for it with Advent. We celebrate it, and then we linger with it. Well, that Christmas season, you go to Catholic churches, all the Hallmark stores have changed over to Valentine's Day by December 27th. And you come to church, and well into January, we're singing Joy to the World. You say, wait, did the choir not get the memo? But the church says, no, the Incarnation, God becoming one of us, needs more than just one day to be celebrated. So we're going to linger with it and stretch it out. And the same is true with Lent. We have weeks and weeks of preparation. Eat a little less, pray a little more, be more charitable, get ready, because God is going to show you what his love looks like at Easter, and that's worth preparing for. And then we have 50 days of the Easter season to linger and bask in the Alleluia. Oh, I'm not allowed to say that, am I? Thank you. Oh, I got permission. Good. All right. To linger in the good news that death is conquered. If that news doesn't get us excited, I don't know what will. That death is conquered. All right? So isn't that worth a couple of weeks of pondering and praying and celebrating? We call it the Easter season, you see. So, That's kind of a framework that I'd like to offer tonight, that Lent is seen as a time of preparation, leading us to that glorious celebration that's crucial. It makes us who we are as believers. Doesn't St. Paul say at one point, if Christ is not risen, then we are the most pitiable of people? We shouldn't be here tonight if Jesus isn't risen, because everything that he has said and I have ever said and any preacher has ever said is a lie. You understand why I say that? If Jesus isn't risen, we shouldn't be here. But he is, so we must be here. And Lent gives us that time to prepare in a new way to experience the power of that love that refuses to stay dead. Right? The love that refuses to stay dead. And so we have this time of preparation. I love the theme you've chosen. It's that journey into the desert, right? If you've been to any desert anywhere, there's not much out there, is there? Right. Lawrence of Arabia, remember the movie Lawrence of Arabia? There's a line in that movie, I love the desert, it's so clean. And I think what he meant, if the deserts I've seen, in the desert there is nowhere to hide, because there's nothing to hide behind. Adam and Eve hid behind trees, right, and fig leaves. Well, there aren't trees and there aren't figs growing in the desert, at least the ones I've been to, unless there's irrigation. Right? There's nowhere to hide in the desert. It's you and God, you and yourself,